Welcome everyone to Office Hours episode. I believe it's episode 15. I've kind of stopped counting. I was told that was not. It's kind of pointless to put numbers in your episode title, so I've lost count. I believe it's 15. We've got a good show today. I'm going to run over the past week, give kind of a sample of what we covered over the past week at the Pamphleteer, and then we're going to talk to Gabriel Mann, about his movie Hotshot, which is a documentary that follows hotshots who are kind of the Navy SEALs of firefighters and go out and help combat the wildfires that you see a lot in the news. Was a kind of a mind-blowing documentary, and we're going to learn more about it from him. He was kind of like right alongside these firefighters. You see it it's pretty incredible stuff. So first, we'll open up with what has gone on here at the Pamphleteer over the past week. What do we got? So yeah, like if you're not familiar, the Pamphleteer is we call it an alt daily. It's fashioned after the alt weekly, which in Nashville, the traditional alt weekly is the Nashville Scene. We call ourselves an alt daily because we're an email newsletter that goes out every day. And we kind of have the same gamut of coverage. We look at cultural stuff, political stuff locally. We have an event calendar, interviews with artists, restaurants, etc. So if you're not signed up, you can sign up on our website at pamphleteer.co. I think it's like down this way somewhere. So if you live in Tennessee, you probably know we're in the middle of a drought. It's getting pretty bad in southwest and southeast Tennessee, or I guess central east Tennessee, down kind of on the Alabama, Mississippi border over there. Or I guess that's the Alabama Mississippi border. So just word to the wise, we are in the middle of a drought. I think Franklin recently put out a water advisory to use less water. Davidson County hadn't done anything of the kind, but we're also kind of we have a moderate drought, and Williamson or Franklin's kind of in the severe drought zone, that orange zone. Another thing that came out this week was that Forbes ranked Nashville as the worst city for commuters, which is kind of odd because I guess they came up with some metric to measure this that was not average travel time to work. As you can see here, New York, Boston, Los Angeles, DC, Houston, all have longer commutes, but Nashville scored lower because very few people are walking to work in Nashville. Even fewer are probably riding the bus to work, and then an even fewer amount are riding their bikes. So I guess that knocks against us. It seems to me that a lot of this is kind of just I don't know what kind of metric they use to build this. But last week we talked about Forbes for some other reason. There was some other graph that we put up here. I don't think it was transit times. What was it? It might have been this, actually. I don't know. Another thing, we put out a list of 4-day drives in Middle Tennessee that you can take from Nashville. I put the link to the article in the YouTube description if you're interested in taking a day trip outside of Nashville. These are like 4 6-hour drives, take you on loops outside of the city and then end up back in the city. This probably the last weekend that we'll have nice fall weather with the leaves and everything. So I think this is probably the last weekend you can get it in before, before all the trees are dead and everything just looks like all the color is gone from the tree. So check that out in the description. And lastly, or I think I got one more thing after this. Megan Barry is running for Congress, which I guess in the state of Tennessee, if you're a convicted felon, it's easier to run for office than it is to vote. So, unable to vote, Megan Barry chooses to run for office. She's going to run for U.S. Congress in Mark Green's district, which is actually where I'm sitting right now, District 7. Rumor is that Mark Green's going to run for governor, so it could be a vacant seat. We won't know until next year, but we'll see. Last thing, there were 2 hotels in Nashville featured in Fodor's list of the 60 best hotels in the world. There were only 13 in the U.S., so 2 being in Nashville is kind of interesting. The Hermitage, of course, downtown, which is a, kind of a Nashville institution. A friend actually recently sent me G.K. Chesterton visited the Hermitage in like 1920 and wrote this pretty interesting observation about it, and talks about looking at the portrait of Andrew Jackson and kind of mounts a defense of Andrew Jackson, which I thought was interesting. The other one is Urban Cowboy over in East Nashville, smaller boutique hotel. I'm familiar with it because of the bar in the back. I think it's called City House, or what do they call the bar? I can't remember what they call it. But they also have great Roberta's Pizza back there, some of the best pizza in town. Pizzeria from New York. So I like hanging out at the Urban Cowboy. Great patio. It's great in the winter too. They got fireplaces and heaters and everything. Good place to hang out. Next, Joe Allen is coming to town to talk. Joe's kind of wrote this book called Aeon. I can't remember the name of his book, but he talks a lot about AI and the effect of technology on humanity, and kind of what the existential ramifications are for the spread of AI and this kind of thing. They titled the talk "AI and the War on Humanity" to underscore that. I put a link in the YouTube description for this event, and you can get 10% off tickets to it if you put in code Pamphleteer, all caps. I haven't included that in the description, but maybe I'll put it in the comments or something. Geneva, maybe we add that to the code Pamphleteer to the YouTube description. So get 10% off that, code Pamphleteer. Should be a good time. 2 weeks from today, actually. That's all we got this past week at the Pamphleteer. Like I said, if you are not on the list, go to pamphleteer.co, sign up for our newsletter. Next up, we're going to bring up Gabriel Mann. Gabriel, I don't know why I keep saying your name, Gabriel. Is that it? Let's go ahead and bring him up and talk about his documentary. It's fantastic. So, do people do that commonly and call Gabrielle? I don't know.
No, you're the only one. Look, man, let's not spoil this meeting of the mustaches by misgendering.
Oh yeah.
No, I get it quite a bit. I mean, it's just the first name in the Bible, but don't worry about it.
Yeah. That's true. Gosh. Well, I'm Davis, and people call me David all the time, and it's kind of like, I'm always having to issue corrections, be like Davis. Well, so it never gets old.
I know, but here's the good thing: is people are going to remember it, because they're not just going to gloss over your name. You got to make them stop and remember it. This is branding 101. So it's like, they say that no PR is bad PR. Yeah. Like, it's the same thing with that.
That's kind of the thing with the name, the Pamphleteer, because people are always like, what is that? How do you spell that? Pamphleteer? When you have to like engage with something like that, I think it sticks better.
100%.
So okay. Well, I watched your movie Hotshot and was kind of blown away by it. I mean, it's like the beginning of it. I'm just gonna talk about it for a second, and then we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty of it, because there's a ton. Yeah. You cover a ton of material in the documentary, in addition to kind of peppering out these just incredible shots that are coming at you so fast. You want to like linger on every single one. Like one that sticks out is the two longhorns standing in front of like a like the silhouettes against flames in the background and this kind of thing. It's a gorgeous documentary, and that was the first thing that stood out to me. The second thing, of course, is how you even got these shots. I mean, when I was watching it, it felt like the footage felt so fresh, because it just. I think people, maybe my senses have even gotten numbed by kind of CGI and just, these kind of like staged shots. And even with documentaries that purport to be raw, there's still this kind of like staged component of it that feels like stale. But I mean, it was the images that you produce in this thing are just crazy and very lively, and we're showing the trailer right now for those that are listening to the audio of this, and it doesn't really do it justice. You got to put it on your TV. But yeah, so tell us, for people that are unfamiliar, you get into this in the documentary, but how did you get into filming hotshots?
Well, I'll get into that, but just to touch on what you just said, man, this is 100% organic film. And it's really interesting that you pointed out the
Artisanal?
authenticity. Yeah, because I mean, right now we have AI taking over friggin' everything that we do. And frankly, it's kind of disgusting and it's a little bit scary as an artist that we're going to be taken over by these algorithms and they're just going to start producing fake imagery. I mean, they've already done it. Everything that you see in this picture, even though it does sort of look like a big, tentpole studio film, it was all caught in the raw. Like I just went to the wildfires. So the way that it started was back in 2013. I started dating a girl who happened to be a wildland firefighter, and she was the only female on her crew. It's a very rare thing to have women excel in wildland fire, just because the physical burdens are really extreme. I mean, it is probably the most difficult job on the planet. And hotshots in particular, most people have no idea who they are, which it sort of lends itself to what they actually do. Hotshots earned their name by getting sent to the hottest parts of the biggest wildfires. So they're the specialists. They're sort of, as you said, they're sort of like the Navy SEALs who get sent into the most remote areas to try to put out the fire by hand. So they're going and combating these million-acre wildfires without water, because the only way that you stop a wildfire once it gets that big is you have to get rid of the fuels. So they're going in with chainsaws, basically like pickaxes, they call Pulaskis, and even rakes. So when people talk about raking the forest, I mean, this is literally what the most elite firefighters in the world actually do. They rake the forest. So, look, hotshots, they have a very unique culture and it's very sacred. And so, people have tried to make documentaries about them and they always fail the first attempt. Like they can't even get through one day. I know the Deadliest Catch crew tried to make a docuseries on hotshots with the same crew that I was with, and they couldn't even make it through one day because it's so physically challenging. Dude, you have no idea how difficult this is. And you saw the flick, so you saw that whole portion where you talk about that PT hike that they have to do to break off the new kids. It is the first time I did it, I thought I was going to die. And I was a college athlete. I did two sports. I did track and field and baseball. This kicked my butt in a way that I cannot describe. And so I realized that I had to work really, really hard if I wanted to get this footage. The thing is, because hotshot culture is really sacred, it's sort of like, these special forces guys, my partner at the time, she didn't talk about it. She never wanted to talk about work because it's so grueling. And so I really had no idea what she did. And then all of a sudden we had a fire right outside of our house in Southern California. And I had this front row seat to what looked like the end of the world. And when you see a wildfire up close, as a human, there is some weird thing in our DNA that bonds us to it. They call this the firebug. There's something about when you see it firsthand, you can't look away and you just crave more. It's like this primal connection. Same thing happened to me. And so from that moment on, I saw the jets flying overhead and the helicopters and everything. I was just determined to get in there and try to film it. And so I spent 6 years exploiting this really stupid media law in California that allows anyone with a press badge to just walk into a wildfire. And so I had my press badge. I just grabbed my cameras and I used red cameras. These are the cameras that they use for like The Hobbit and the huge, Hollywood films, but they're like super durable. So I would just put my hand, hike up the hill right next to the hotshots, and I just acted as if I belonged and nobody told me to leave. And so I just did that for 6 years and, cheated death a few times and then ultimately ended up, making this flick, and it's about an hour and a half. But it's like, as you said, it's pretty densely packed because, man, did we see a lot along the way.
Yeah. You narrate over the footage the whole time and you're kind of, one thing you were talking about mustaches at the beginning. You draw the comparison between the firefighters with their mustaches and the hotshots with their kind of ungroomed beards. And there's so much that I was curious to learn more about in detail, like from everything from how the hotshots dress in comparison to the more traditional firefighter, to this whole thing where they're like digging trenches basically to separate fuel sources. And I mean, it was really fascinating. I'd never thought about kind of how these things are combated, and I was also jealous of them having these awesome chainsaws, which I assume were like still like I've got a Stihl MS-170. That's probably my favorite, power tool. But it looks like they had like the giant Stihls on their back. I mean, Yeah, it's awesome. So, did you train with them to get ready to go film some of this stuff? Like, talk more about the how much preparation you did with them, because, like you said, it's a very tight crew of people, and I imagine that as an outsider, it might be hard to kind of like get in their good graces because you could potentially just be in the way. Um,
100%. Yeah,
so
and if
yeah,
you watch, I mean, you remember that section in the film about the media clowns, and they really
yeah,
do
yeah,
get in the way. It's a circus because the liberal laws out there. It is quite a disaster. Look, because I was dating one of them and living with one for a long time. Um, I was a part of the family, so I was sort of straddling that line of being an insider and being an outsider. So officially, no, I did not train with them, but unofficially, yeah, I did. I mean, anyone can go to one of the national forests and do their hike. You can do the
right,
same PT hike that they do. I mean, it's our land, and you throw on a 60-pound weight vest and go and go wreck yourself. I took all the same courses that they take. There's classes that they do called S190. They do an 80-hour refresher course. So I did all of these things independently because, of course, the feds didn't want to give me any access. So I
right.
just did it myself. And I think having an understanding of what their tactics are was really important so that I never got in the way. I always knew which way they were going to be progressing, when it was safe for me to go up and when it was too risky. And so I was pretty conservative, despite what you see in the film. I mean, a lot of stuff and calamity came at me, and
Mm-hmm.
we had to dodge death a few times. But for the most part, I was actually quite conservative because I did study alongside these guys and really understood what they do. The real challenge, of course, is just keeping up with them because these are like absolute physical freaks. And to your point earlier, a lot of people have no understanding of how you put out a wildfire. It's kind of daunting, especially when all you see is just the massive flames on TV. And typically the media only covers the red trucks that are squirting water on things. But
Yeah,
ultimately,
yeah, yeah.
once that fire gets established, it's those dudes taking their steels out into the middle of nowhere, into the places where nobody can get to. The bulldozers can't get there. Nothing can get there except these little mountain goats who camp out for sometimes 2 weeks at a time and don't change their clothes for 2 weeks. And they're just sweating and grueling in the August heat, cutting out the fuels, because ultimately that's the only way that you stop the fire. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's an insane level of work. And the crazy thing is they're not even classified as firefighters. And this
Huh.
is another pretty, I think, a shocking point that people don't understand. The Forest Service has sort of pigeonholed them into this category that they call forestry technicians, which
Huh.
enables them to pay them less than the firefighters that we're accustomed to seeing every day, going into structure fires. So these guys are doing the most difficult job in the world, and the Congress won't even pay them like firefighters, and their agency won't even call them a firefighter until they die, of course. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we're so sad for the loss of our dear firefighter. So it's a really interesting landscape. There's a lot there to unpack. And of course, because these guys are out in the remote wilderness, nobody really knows what they do. And so to me, as a storyteller, I thought this is like the most ripe, fertile field I can imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so why is it that the media, is it just because they're not as brave as you and they're not going to follow the hotshots in there that you see the big red truck squirting water on the stuff? Like why do you think, like, cuz with I mean, learning about it, it's pretty compelling. You have these people literally running into the fire using chainsaws and rakes to stop it. It's a much more, compelling image of a firefighter, in my opinion, than a guy holding a hose. Like, not to
100,
diminish,
dude, you're
but why
100% right.
why
Shots are far and away the most compelling part of the wildfire. That's why I was drawn from them. That's why I always found myself alone because the media would always chase the disaster porn, and I wanted to go see the dudes who are actually doing the work and
Yeah,
doing this
yeah.
insanely. I mean, it's a terrifying job. And let me get it straight: I'm not more brave. I'm not brave at all. I'm terrified. Every time I went out there, I was terrified. I'm just dumb. I'm really dumb, and I got lucky. God kept me safe for 6 years. Um, I would say that the people who I was filming, they're extremely brave, and they go out and they keep doing it all year long.
Yeah.
Here's the real answer. The media makes a lot of money off of fear pornography. That it's
Like
just,
houses burning down, like
yeah.
houses, like basically a residence burning down. That's what they're more interested in
Mhm.
filming.
100%. So they get a lot of clicks. Whenever they see the destruction, that's what they focus on. And of course, it's easy. It's right there. The homes are on nicely paved roads. The hotshots are going up these overgrown forest roads in the middle of nowhere, parking their buggies and then hiking another 6, 7, 8 miles and then camping out. And so if you're not willing to do that, you're never going to see them and you're never going to tell their story. But like you said, they are the most compelling element of wildland fire because these are the special forces guys and they get zero recognition. But I think there's too much of an incentive in the media to amp up fear and paranoia and hysteria and histrionics. And, if anything that I try to do in the film, and you'll notice that the tone and tenor of it is it's rather calm, despite all the chaos that we do see in some of the footage. That is sort of the tone that Hotshots take. I really tried to, sort of approximate their voice and their demeanor, which is they've been there. They've seen it all. They don't have this sort of histrionic, panicky vibe to them. They're very calm and matter of fact about it. And the media is the opposite of that. Additionally, there's just this really deep incentive for them to try to propagate a narrative that the only reason the fires are getting bad is because of climate change. Right. And this stuff has never happened before. It's unprecedented. They're like trying to sell you this idea that there was never a wildfire before like 1998. And it's one of the more absurd things, and it's maddening trying to watch. And if you talk, or if you know wildland firefighters and you talk to them, they all express their frustration. They hate the media. They refuse to talk to the media because every time they'll come to the station and want to do an interview, like with the LA Times, the New York Times, or Washington Post, they'll get some quotes and then they'll totally disregard them. And they'll sort of make it sound like, oh, the firefighters are really concerned about this fire season. Like, no, they're not. They want to make some money and go have some adventure because they see the same thing every year. And so the difference between the actual profession and then the media who write about the profession, it couldn't be more broad. And so as someone who is, so involved in it, that was really maddening for me to observe. So no, it's not about bravery. I just saw these are the most compelling people, the most compelling stories. And what the media is always force feeding us, like, look, man, I just wanted to give an honest reflection of what this culture is like because I found it truly fascinating. And these are the ones who are genuinely carrying on the traditions of our ancestors.
Yes. Yeah.
My mom's side of the family, we're Choctaw Indian. And so I learned about medicinal fire when I was growing up, but I think most people don't understand that the Indians were burning off the forest every year for 10,000 years. And so they managed our forests in a way that seems to have escaped us. At least in the West, California is probably the worst. They're the most poorly managed state in the union. And hotshots are the only ones sort of carrying on this tradition of putting fire on the ground, using medicinal fire. It's something that's as vital to the forest as water and sunlight. And so, like you said, man, they're the most compelling story by far.
What kind of guys are attracted to this, to being hotshots? Like, give us a profile of the stereotypical hotshot.
It reminds me a lot of my teammates in baseball, track and field. These are guys who are very physically fit. And look, man, most young men want adventure, and it's typically young men. And it's also people who actually commune with nature. I think a lot of times we think of people who are nature freaks as actually urban city dwellers who like to tweet about the environment and drive a Subaru, and maybe occasionally they'll go to Yosemite and take some pictures for their Instagram. But these are the salt of the earth, blue collar guys who will go drive out into the middle of the woods with their Toyota truck and camp out for a week and just fish and hunt. I mean, we're talking like straight up good old boys who put a dip in their lip and enjoy the roughhousing and the dirt and the grind. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily masochistic. To me, it's one of the most rewarding experiences you can have because you have all this, catharsis through, rigorous exercise, extreme exposure to nature, and witnessing wildfire firsthand. I'm telling you, dude, it really does something to you. And extreme fire behavior is like the most powerful force of nature on the planet. And so you do get sort of addicted to it. A lot of these dudes really do get addicted to being out there and engaging with fire because it's as pure a natural experience as you're ever going to have.
Yeah. I mean, are fatalities common? Are hotshots dying during these fire? Like, how common is that?
we're at a point now where we lose 2 hotshots on average every year, at least, which is, given how few hotshots there are, because again, these are very elite firefighters. So there's only about 2,000 of them. There's less and less every year because the way the Forest Service and Congress treats them and pays them, they're losing more and more because they just can't make ends meet, especially, on these expensive zip codes in California. So 2 out of 2,000 folks every single year, that's a lot. I mean, it's just about the highest death rate of any profession on the planet. The only other people who have a higher death rate per capita are loggers. And, hotshots cut down trees. And so, that's one of the main causes. This year, unfortunately, there were 2 heart attacks. 2 heart attacks. And this isn't something that should be happening to men in their 20s who are extremely physically fit. There were some mandates that got passed for federal employees about 1.5 years ago. And all of a sudden we're starting to see some heart attacks. It's a really scary thing, but it seems like no matter what, whether it's tree strikes, whether it's a burnover, a vehicle accident, or now heart attacks are a part of the hazard of the job, we're losing 2 a year. It's a lot. So it's extremely hazardous. And one of the most heartbreaking things is, as I was touching on earlier, the Forest Service doesn't call them firefighters. They call them forestry technicians. It's this bureaucratic loophole so they can afford to, get them to do the work of firefighters without paying them as firefighters. But once they get killed, suddenly at the funeral, they put on all their fancy clothes and then they mourn the loss of their firefighter. And so there's this really dark, morbid joke amongst hotshots that they, if you ever ask them, hey, what's a forestry technician? They'll just say, oh, it's just a firefighter who hasn't died yet. Because they only call you a firefighter when you die. And unfortunately, we're seeing at least 2 funerals every single year. And it's really devastating. It's a very small community. And so everybody feels it. And there's usually these, this shock that reverberates through the community. And it's pretty tragic. But these guys are very resilient and they tend to just, I've seen crews immediately go back into service after losing somebody and they just immediately get back to work because they're just committed to service.
So I think you said 115 crews across the country, and most of them, let me test my memory here, 49 are in California.
Yeah. Now, it's a moving target. That the numbers do change year over year because if you lose a few guys, you can't meet your qualification status, you get delisted as a Type 1 crew. But yeah, roughly that's about right.
Yeah, most of the wildfires, we don't have a ton of anymore. We don't have a ton of wildfires. You're in Tennessee now, I understand. There's not as many wildfires in the eastern United States. They seem to mostly cluster in the West. Is there, why is that? It's maybe a naive question, but it is significantly drier in the West, so I suppose it's just easier for things to catch on fire.
The West is a permanent fire climate. Look, Tennessee is vulnerable to wildfires, primarily, in the Smokies. Residents of Gatlinburg are very familiar with, 5 or 6 years back, they had a pretty massive wildfire. So look, the thing is, there is an inevitability to it, and certain communities and certain areas are more vulnerable. So there are different regions that have different kinds of vulnerabilities. But in short, the reason why fires are getting so bad in California in particular is because bureaucracy is deliberately making them worse. And this was one of the most mind-blowing things for me to learn in my process of making this film, that the bureaucrats are deliberately making it worse. And the only way I can explain it is there's just too much money in the suppression game. So the thing is, forests, and I'll give you an example. The lodgepole pine, certain kind of pine tree, it is fire dependent. So the only way that it can propagate is when the pine cone burns, explodes, and the resinous seeds spill out and they get germinated by the high heat. So without fire, that tree goes extinct. Now, this is true of a lot of tree species throughout the US. And so when you deprive the forest of fire, you're actually killing it. And anyone who's ever tended a garden knows that you can't just let weeds grow. You can't let everything grow unabated. You have to get rid of some of the stuff because they're water hogs. So if you have enough water for 5 plants and then you allow 10 plants to grow, you just cut your water supply in half because the water demand went up. So when you deprive the forest of fire, it creates a drought even when there isn't one. And so that's why it doesn't matter what the weather's doing anymore. We have taken fire out of the forest so deeply in California, and they're not doing enough prescribed burns to keep up with that natural growth rate, that you're seeing this huge accumulation of vegetation or fuels. And so then you get these massive explosive wildfires. Obviously, we're not nearly as much of a risk here in Tennessee. But California doesn't need to be as bad as it is. It's only bad because the bureaucracy blocks all these prescription burns. And a big part of it is the California Air Resources Board, because these urban city dwellers in San Francisco and Los Angeles don't want to smell smoke. And so they ban all of these burn operations, and then they lie about how much they're actually doing. So if you ever hear California say, hey, we treated 10,000 acres, that's not even anything. California, they inflate their numbers 10 to 12 times over what they're actually doing. So if you hear them say, hey, we burned 10,000 acres, they actually only did 1,000. This state needs to do 4 million acres of prescription burning every year to keep up with the natural growth rate. So far, they've done 40,000 acres. Wow. And it's like, it is so embarrassing to watch. And what's really frustrating, again, is all these people are then putting it on climate change. When it's like, dude, all you have to do is go actually clear the brush, get rid of this vegetation, stop suppressing every fire, let them burn a little bit, and then you're going to have a more peaceful environment, the same way that the natives had for thousands of years.
Like, what are Hotshots responsible for doing these controlled burns in theory? Were they to, and so like when there's they're not only working when a wildfire explodes, they're doing lots of preventative work around forests to prevent them from happening in the first place, like digging fire breaks and that kind of thing. I'm curious if you could elaborate on kind of what they're doing when there's not a big fire to fight.
Yeah, look, in a perfect world, what Hotshots are doing during the off season is, as you said, they're doing these major firing operations. And in other states outside of California, that happens a lot more. So Florida burns 2 million acres. Alabama burns 1 million acres every year. And, the hotshot crews, when they're in off-season mode, they're usually prepping and burning. They should be doing a lot more of that, but California government in particular is restricting them from doing that. Now, hotshots, in order to be a hotshot crew, you have to have all these high-level qualifications. And so when we hear the term burn boss, that's someone who's spent a lot of time doing a lot of these controlled burns. And the idea is you get rid of the fuels on a good weather day on your terms. Because when Mother Nature decides to do that in the middle of summer, when it's hot and dry and windy, it's going to be nuclear and you're never going to stop it. When the hotshots are feathering in fire on the landscape, they're very deliberate with it. I mean, they're almost like artists with it. They kind of paint with fire. It's a lot more low intensity fire. It just gets rid of all the garbage, all the tree matter that falls every year and the branches and stuff like that. And it just cleans it out. Wildfire is nature's cleaning crew. And hotshots are probably the best at doing it. And as I was saying earlier, they're like the literal torchbearers of this ancient tradition that our ancestors were doing for 10,000 years. So yeah, during the off season, that's what they're doing. But now, because California's gotten so challenging, they're doing their major firing operations on the big fires to try to stop them from encroaching further into the urban interface.
Yeah, there was a good passage in there. I'm just looking through my notes. There was a good period in there where you described kind of what they do, in the midst of a fire, and I thought it was just kind of a separate fire from its fuel, wet it, cut it, rinse and repeat. So there is a burn going on there. Like you show these videos of them literally like digging up bushes and trees and cutting stuff down and building these, dirt trenches between two parts of the forest and then wetting those down and then continuing along. I mean, it looks just like absolutely backbreaking work.
It is. Yeah, it is.
I don't. Yeah,
it's like extreme gardening, and that's the thing. I think sometimes people are kind of shocked sometimes to see how remedial it sort of looks, and we focus on the helicopters and the jets, dropping the pink retardant everywhere.
Yeah,
those are all there just to support the hand crews, and that's what people need to understand. All those water drops, they're not putting out the fire. They're just slowing it down so the hotshots have enough time to construct that fire line and get rid of the fuels, because that's the only way that you can stop it. I've seen so many fires where, once the flames get over about 11 feet tall, And dude, some of these fires, they're like 400-foot flame lengths. So like the amount of heat coming off this is like on a level you can't even describe. And when they drop water on it, a lot of times the water just vaporizes before it even hits the flames. I'll see one helicopter working one tree all day, and it just never stops. It just keeps burning until it's done burning. So yeah, I mean, these dudes, it is back-breaking labor. They lead with the chainsaws, then they come in and they basically dig a trench, and they're throwing the bushes over to the side and clear as big a line as they can. And if they have enough time, they'll burn off one side of it. So they're basically trying to send the fire in on itself and get rid of that big buffer of fuels before the big head of fire comes at them with a head of steam on it.
Huh. You just drove your Jeep in there? Like your Jeep stood up to the elements out there? How'd the Jeep feel?
Yeah.
I also liked how you talked about how you were listening to classical. You like listening to classical music when you're driving through all that stuff. That's kind of surreal to imagine.
Yeah, it's quite a contrast too. Especially, I mean, some of the imagery in this is like, it really looks like hell on earth. But yeah, look, I should probably make a Jeep commercial at this point because it's pretty incredible. And you see it in the film. Some of the situations that we got into are pretty insane. But I would always put on classical music to try to keep me calm and focused because, you know, there's a lot of chaos in it. And this is, you know, one of the credos of hotshot crews. They try to bring order to chaos. And it's really easy to get lost in that. And when you feel that heat coming in through your windows and it starts boiling your skin, it's pretty intense. And so everything that I could do to try to manage my anxiety and fear, like I told you, I wasn't brave. I was terrified. Like, dude, I lost hair making this movie for 6 freaking years because it was like,
why? Because it burned off?
So, dude, no, not even that. It's just terrifying. It's a really scary environment. And like I said, extreme fire behavior, it is this crazy animal that you can't even describe. That's why I had to make the movie. When you see it, you start to understand. It's almost like this living creature, like Godzilla or something. And it's really incredible to watch, especially to watch how these men and a few brave women can wield it and they can like tame it. It's like watching someone tame the dragon, and it's really incredible to watch. It's like one of the most fascinating jobs I could ever conceive of. But yeah, managing your fear is a huge part of it. At least it was for me.
How did the camera stand up?
Dude, okay.
Did it ever overheat or anything?
No.
I'm asking the technical questions now.
All right. So this is the crazy thing. Like I said, we used red cameras. So I had a red Helium and a red Gemini and a red Komodo. Earlier, like when I first started filming, I was scared to take the reds out there because these are like high-end cinema cameras. So it's like, that's what I use when I'm shooting commercials and movies and stuff. Every other camera that I used, even GoPros, would go down from the heat. And so finally I was like, all right, screw it. I'm going to take out the red. I took the red. And of course, the first fire that I took my big fancy red, you know, $40,000 camera out there, I got dumped on by like 6 helicopters, and it didn't even blink. And I still like the camera I'm using for this webcast is one of the cameras that I was taking on all the fires. They're still ticking. So I don't understand why they're still alive, because frankly they shouldn't be. But dude, red, like that's a commercial if I've ever seen one, because it's like these things are the most durable cameras on the planet. And no, they went down from the heat. All the other cameras, the Sonys, the GoPros, but these ones never did. Even my iPhone would shut from time to time.
Did you? I assume you have a filmmaking background.
Sort of. Look, I tried to stay out of Hollywood. I tried to sort of build my own career, you know, with cinema in my own kind of independent way. So I was filming for EDC, which is this big music festival. I was doing commercials, stuff like that, the occasional documentary, and I was staying outside of the studio system because, frankly, Hollywood's pretty gross. I don't
I've worked out there and you know, spent some time working in TV specifically, like the Netflix stuff, and I lasted less than a year. I just couldn't do it.
See, I'd be curious to hear more about that, because frankly, that's part of why I'm here in Tennessee now, is because look, California's lost. But even beyond that, Hollywood's lost. They produce so much garbage. I mean, like we can put aside all the character flaws of some of these goblins who work in Hollywood, but they don't make good movies anymore. They suck. It's just recycled garbage, or there's some kind of, you know, woke quota behind it, and it's not being steered by any artistry. And I think that Nashville is actually, you know, you were actually talking about this recently. You were talking about Nashville as Athens of the South. Yeah. And that really piqued my interest because I see a sort of renaissance in that regard, because I think these sort of artistic cultural centers that used to be, you know, the peak of American cultural civilization are now lost. They've become Sodom and Gomorrah. And I think now Nashville is actually going to reemerge as Athens of America, not just the South. And it's like, I see a lot of talent coming out here. And, you know, I've built a studio here. We're going to start renting it out for other productions because we built it around our workflow. And we're also making movies out here because I think there's a giant market for people who are underserved by the entertainment industry, who don't want something with an agenda. They don't want to be lectured, and they just want it to be steered by genuine artistry and not some kind of weird quota or all this wokeness and all this weird cultural stuff. It's like, dude, just make good movies. Like, I miss the 90s. I miss Jurassic Park and Terminator 2. And it's like, those movies were just agnostic and great films. And it's like, that's something that I want to bring back. And so we're hoping to build our community out here with like-minded people who are sick of Hollywood and want to get invested in doing some bigger productions out here, because I really do. I think you're onto something, and it couldn't be more timely. I genuinely think Nashville's going to reemerge as Athens of the U.S.
So I'm from here, and you know, I worked out in Silicon Valley for a bit, and I came back to Nashville with, you know, the kind of goal in mind, or the vision to try to start kind of an indie film scene in the same way that Richard Linklater did in Austin. And, you know, I still, and then I went and worked out in LA and then came back here because COVID shut down the city. And I didn't last a week once they did all the lockdowns out there. I was like, man, this place is like, it was like the wool got pulled back from my eyes. And I realized I was living in literally hell on earth. So, you know, I moved back, but yeah, I totally agree. And it sounds like we've had a similar realization as regards, you know, film and entertainment and wanting to kind of carve out our own niche. And I got a bunch of friends that feel the same way. And, you know, ultimately I think that will happen. It has to happen. I mean, they're, you know, what you've put together this fantastic, movie and, did it by yourself. And, you know, you're not alone. There are others out there that are, you know, putting together projects. And, as far as Nashville as Athens of the South, you know, I've got like kind of a thing that I'm going to write about this. But one of the interesting things is that like the label of Nashville as Athens of the South came from the then president of Cumberland College, which used to be in Nashville. As you know, he called it the Athens of the West at the time because it was, you know, the westernmost population center west of the Appalachian Mountains. But that's like Nashville's real identity and its real cultural center is this. The Chamber of Commerce started passing around Music City as a moniker in the 80s to kind of gin it up as this tourist capital, country music, and trying to develop the city in that direction. And I think ultimately it's kind of like a departure from what the city really is, which is this arts hub. And, you know, before the Civil War, there were theaters all over town, and they would have in, you know, ballerinas, opera singers, etc. You know, the arts of the time. But Nashville was an interesting kind of cultural hub for that in the South. And yeah, I mean, I'm full on board with that. The problem is, of course, and this is what puts me at odds, just because I think if you think this way and you think about kind of wanting to produce you know, art and like make a place beautiful, it puts you at odds with the people who work in government right now, who are more like bean counters basically, or they're looking at spreadsheets and they're making decisions based off that. It's like, you know, I think Nashville has a unique opportunity to be kind of a city that thinks with its balls in a lot of ways, you know. I would love for that to happen. I mean, trust me, I started this project as an attempt to kind of express that vision of Nashville, because I agree with you fully. And there's, you know, what drew you to the area? Because you're in Mount Juliet, right?
We're at Mount Juliet. We're right off Old Hickory Lake. I grew up on a lake, nice. So I'm very drawn to water.
Yeah.
Look, I had a similar story. Obviously, look, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, people don't understand what it's like to lose something that you really love and to watch it eaten alive in front of you in slow motion for 30 straight years. I know there's a lot of trepidation with a bunch of Californians moving out here because, look, I consider myself a refugee, but I didn't come out to Nashville to change it. I came here to reinforce it because in the same way that, like, Cubans in Florida, especially South Florida, are going to be your most hardcore advocates and, conservationists. I think it's the same with us because California was blessed with so much natural beauty, so many natural gifts. It's really like God's gift to the United States, and they ruined it.
I know.
And, I got a front row seat to how they're ruining the forests and they're destroying people's homes. They can't get insurance anymore because they've ruined the wildfire landscape so severely. It's like, you can't even live in the beautiful parts of California anymore. So to watch something beautiful just get destroyed, I was like, look, it can't be saved. It really can't. And so all right, I tried. I give up. And I was looking at 3 different places, just like everybody else who was fleeing. I was looking at Texas. I was looking at Florida. And, frankly, Nashville was 3rd on my list. But the more I analyzed it, the more I felt there is much more of a cultural background in Nashville. There's a lot more art and character. That soul is here. It's not like I'm bringing it. It's here. You just have to tap into it. And when people come here, when people come to visit, they feel it. There is something in the air here that just inspires creativity and romance and connection with nature and all the feels that sort of make us as artists want to create things. And so I couldn't think of a better incubator than Nashville for creative arts. And it's not just music. Yeah, you're right. Nashville's got sort of pigeonholed as Music City. Like, that's all there is to offer. And I'm telling you, that's not the case. And, I was a little concerned bringing my production company out here because obviously we have access to so many resources because everybody goes to Hollywood to try to make their dreams come true. So we were worried, man, are we going to be able to find enough actors to do our commercials? Dude, it's been easy. There is so much talent out here. And I think, I don't think it's about creating. I think it's just about having the confidence that we can do everything that we want here. We don't need to wait for Hollywood to figure their stuff out. And we don't need to wait on bureaucrats to live with some balls because they never will. They're not designed for it. Their brains don't work like that. Their brains only work to grift, and God knows what else they do with our taxes. But if we as a community sort of step up and say, like, yeah, I can be a film producer. Some business owner in Brentwood can be a film producer. There's no magic to being a producer. It's just about, like you were talking about earlier, just if you get enough creative minds together and you pool your resources, you can create really significant stuff. When you see Hotshot, when you see this movie, it looks like a big Hollywood production. Dude, it was just me hand holding a couple of cameras. And it's like, it's not that complicated if you're really committed to doing it. We looked at the Daily Wire coming out here as sort of a bellwether because, they're probably the biggest operation in terms of trying to produce Hollywood or, movies outside of Hollywood. But, they've got their niche, and we actually pitched the movie to them. We got all the way to the top, and ultimately they decided, and if you see it, it's a little too spicy for their brand. So, it's understandable why they passed on it, but they couldn't have been more nice. They were awesome. And, we've gone to a few premieres. They've invited us out to a few things. They've been really, a pleasure to deal with. But I think people need to think a little bit bigger. You don't need to just try to pitch the Daily Wire. You don't need to just try to fit in their ecosystem. I think there's a lot of room for growth. And I'm not talking bringing big trucks into rural Nashville to shoot movies. I feel like there can be a real grassroots filmmaking community out here. And I've invested everything that I have into that. Like, we built out this pretty ridiculous studio here because that's how much I believe in this space. This is where I want to plant my roots. This is where I want to raise a family. I couldn't conceive of a better place to raise a family than Nashville. And so I really want to channel that. And hopefully that, I can connect with folks like you and other people in your network who want to do the same thing because it's totally within our grasp.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned, so my experience with Nashville has always been when I come back here, it might be because I'm from here, but I think there's more to it than that. But when I come back here, my mind is quieter, and I've spent time on the West Coast and North and South, and I went to school in Alabama. So, I've lived a couple of places to get a sense that it feels pretty unique to Nashville. But there is something kind of calming about the area. And I don't think it's even has to do with like the pace of the city, or I think it's the hills, to be honest with you, and the Cumberland Rim. We're like in this bowl, or we're really in this collapsed dome that millions of years ago collapsed and formed this basin, and that's why the weather's so crazy too, and all over the place. And we just sit, the rim encircles us, so we're in this like, I don't know, prehistoric oasis kind of. But what's interesting about that is there's only 5 states in the country where between 2020 and 2022, the number of children, this is like my favorite stat to trot out. But during COVID, only 5 states had the population of children between the ages of 0 and 4 increase. And it was Idaho, North and South Carolina, Tennessee, and Utah, I think. But if you zoom in and you look at Tennessee, most of that is Middle Tennessee, which is even more like West Tennessee is kind of on the decline, and East Tennessee is just hard to settle because of the mountains. But Middle Tennessee is just, blooming, and it's always been that way. It's such a strange part of the country that's very underrated. It's not near a body of water, so I think but we're in this rim. We've got rivers that can. I don't know. I'm kind of fascinated. The more I've lived here, and I especially love the fall. The fall has gotten to the point where the fall is just the most beautiful thing in the world. I'm sure by the time I'm 60, I'll tear up when the leaves start turning orange. To be honest with you, I mean it's powerful to witness.
It really is.
And you don't get the change of the seasons in California, and there's a lot here that it's like I'm not, being someone that's from here, I'm not, like I moved here too, like even though I am from here. I think that the California refugee thing is great because frankly, it's just kind of the natural process. And I think we do need some fresh blood in town. So next, well, there's so much we could talk about here. It sounds like we have similar ideas about entertainment and all that stuff. But have you, like, what's your strategy with releasing the movie? Have you just put it out online and you're kind of guerrilla marketing it, that kind of thing? Have you thought about putting it in festivals or anything like that?
Oh, we tried. I submitted to every festival imaginable and got rejected by every single one.
Are you serious?
And 100%. Yeah. And that's what's so crazy. Because dude, we got a huge spread in ink in the Chicago Tribune. So like people love the movie. Like the reviews have been insane. But the thing is look, there are gatekeepers in the entertainment industry. Yeah. And like, look, I don't look like a Choctaw Indian. And so when people look at me, they think, well, okay, it's just another white dude.
Did you ham it up? Were you like, what are you're denying a Native American access?
I've never done that. I should.
Yeah, you should.
I was the idiot. I took out a student loan in college, and I didn't even try to flex it then when I really should have. And it's look, man, I don't want to participate in this stupid woke quota BS. I don't believe in it. And so for me, even to take advantage of it, I don't believe in doing that because it's like I think we should try to maintain our integrity as much as possible. But no, we got rejected because people, dude, the world today is so sensitive. It's crazy. So people would flip out because the hotshots are using some salty language. It's like, dude, these are animals. It's like if you hang around Navy SEALs, they're gonna talk some smack. And I'm sorry if you're offended by it, but it's like this is an honest film, and I'm not gonna change it. So we got rejected for a few reasons. HBO rejected us because they wanted a celebrity in it, and Netflix rejected us because they thought that it was misogynistic. It literally features a female hotshot.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
the fact that I framed it the way that I did, which is to say she has to work 3 times harder than the dudes to keep up. I'm like, that honors her service. That doesn't denigrate women at all. We're being realistic. But of course, we're not realistic about gender in today's society. And the other complaint was that it wasn't about climate change. I'm like, I'm sorry. Again, like, I'm not going to lie. Every hotshot you talk to will tell you, like, yeah, it's not climate that's doing this. Like, we had bigger fires before. It's because we keep putting the fires out. It's like, we need to burn more. And so everybody wanted me to change the film, and I'm really stubborn. I wouldn't do it. We got rejected by everybody. So what I did was, there's a service we use called Bitmax where you can submit your film. You pay about $3,000 and they can upload it. They're called an aggregator. They can upload it to Amazon, Apple, Google Play, and Vudu. So currently that's where the film is, but they were taking a long time. It takes a long time for Amazon to process your stuff, like months and months and months. And we had this issue with the firefighters needing to get their pay, and they're about to get their pay cut in the next couple of weeks. And so it's a big deal on Capitol Hill in Congress. And so I was having this sense of urgency back in August, like, dude, if we don't get this out now, I mean, these dudes are going to get their pay cut in half, and like hotshots are going to be a relic of the past. So I just went on Wix. I made a template website and I put it up on our website, and it's hotshotmovie.com. I did that one night in a couple of hours and then just put it up and announced it on Twitter. I've only got like 2,000 followers. I don't have any following. And people started flocking to it. It was just word of mouth. People were sharing it, and dude, it started blowing up just on the website. And that's before it even released on Amazon and these other platforms. And so, dude, it's never been a better time to be an independent filmmaker. Because, like, dude, if you can get your hands on a Red, you're shooting with the same camera that David Fincher is using, like literally the exact same camera. So you can make it look like any big Hollywood movie, and you can get it up on Amazon for a few $1,000, or you can just post it on your website. And dude, you know how hard it is for a film to be profitable. It's like one of the most difficult things in the world. Even these big budget flicks in Hollywood are losing money. We're profitable. We're 2.5 months in. We're already profitable. And like, that's the message that I want to broadcast to people out here. It's like, this isn't some mysterious, like alchemy that only belongs in Hollywood. Like, we can all make high level films and make money doing it. There's we're already showing that there is a successful model and that there is a market for it. A lot of people want to see genuine films. Yes. And so in terms of the publicity, it's been my buddy Phil Donlin, who is like one of my producers, kind of spreading the word. We managed to get the Chicago Tribune. You reached out to me on Twitter, like just randomly, because I'd mentioned something about Nashville. And it's been just organic like that. And then the other thing that we haven't been able to talk about is there is some stuff going on behind the scenes in DC with the film. I'm hoping we can discuss that in the next week or so. But that's been a pretty big deal, and we've been engaging with some higher ups in that regard. But this is all. What's that?
I can theorize about what you mean by that, but
we'll see. We'll keep our powder dry on that one. But yeah, it's all just been organic, but we're already profitable with it. And so we're hopeful that can just continue to grow, and people are just sharing it. And look, the feedback, especially from wildland firefighters and hotshots, and I've had a bunch of them reach out to me, including dudes who I don't even know, who saw it, and they're calling me in tears, saying it's like, dude, this is the most authentic representation of what we actually do. And so I think all of this is just a testament that if you stick true to your artistic vision, don't cave in to these gatekeepers if they want you to change it, and don't try to approximate what you think the audience wants, and like, oh, well, I can't put this in there because it's going to offend people. Screw them, dude. We need people who have the balls to make art that's honest and genuine. And I think when you do that and you are genuine about it, people really connect with it. In the same way, when you come to Nashville, you connect with this energy that's there. It's because there's something pure and magical here. And I think the same thing is true when you have integrity with artistry. People want it. We crave it. We don't want AI. We don't want these woke quotas. Nobody wants that. They want real art. And so I think what we're doing is working, and hopefully we can just keep building from there. And we're already moving on to our next project, and hopefully we can just build off of that and keep going.
You're gonna go do Deadliest Catch next? Like a little bit, you know, go see if you can pull that off.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. It is going to be around fishing.
Okay.
But it's not going to be a documentary.
Have you ever seen Lucian Castings Taylor's documentaries? He's got like Leviathan, and then one called Sweetgrass, and then another one. I can't. Those are the two that I'm familiar with.
I think I saw Leviathan a while ago, but not Sweetgrass.
Like the footage that you got reminds me of that, because the footage that he gets is just like, you're like, how? But some of the shots he puts in there, you're like, why would that? I don't. Like, I remember one, it looks like a camera's just strapped on the side of the boat and it's dipping in and out of the water, and the seagulls are coming and grabbing the fish remains spilling out of one of the, you know, the gunwales or whatever, the holes in the side.
Dude, I'm amazed that you know that reference, by the way, because it's a little bit of an esoteric reference. And I remember early on in the process of me trying to edit this film, my brother sent me that film to watch as inspiration. So, dude, kudos to you.
Well, that's what yours, you know, kind of. He doesn't have a voiceover thing, so, you know, but yours it was similar in the way it was cut together, and kind of, you know, it was impressionistic in that regard. Also, I'll say too about the beginning, when you open up talking about there are no gender studies classes here. She's a girl. She has to keep up. Like, I was kind of like bracing for, you know, I feel conditioned to do this every time something comes on. I'm like bracing for the politics to like get, you know, just blasted in my face. And so I, you know, I'm sitting there like, but you beautifully subverted that. And I, you know, I don't know if that was intentional for you to open up, you know, it is the story of how you got into it. So you have to start there basically, but it also works well to set the tone for the movie. And like, it kind of clears your head of having to worry about this being something that's going to beat you over the head about climate change, or tell you that, you know, that women can deadlift 500 pounds just like a man. You know, it was refreshing though, but the way it opens up kind of like frees you to enjoy the images that you show later.
That's great.
That was like an interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting observation. You know, when the first cut of the film, I didn't want to be a part of it at all. My first cut of the film was just about them. Yeah. And then people told me, they're like, why am I watching this person? And they encouraged me to include my story, because of course, you know, the female who I was featuring was the girl who I was dating at that time. Right. And so it was, you know, a little awkward that I'm trying to tell that story without being a part of it. And so I cut in that segment that you're talking about. But yeah, man, like the whole point was to try to establish right out of the gate, like, this isn't your mommy's movie. This is your daddy's movie.
Yeah.
This, like, we're not going to do this woke BS here. This is real life. And again, every element of the film it's like connected to some aspect of hotshot culture, which is they don't deal in academic exercises. It's fine for some dork on TV to talk about climate change and wildfires because there's no consequences to wasting your time with that. But in their world, there's analog input and analog output. You have to go and do X, Y, and Z, or X, Y, and Z is going to burn you up. And so they cannot operate with these fantasies. If you can't get up the hill, you die. If you can't drive this big old buggy, your whole crew dies. So there's actual accountability for people who work in the blue collar space versus the academics. And it's the academics who are controlling the narrative. And so it's very frustrating for me to just watch all of the media that we see. And like you said, you're conditioned to sort of expect that and be braced for it. I'm sick of that, dude. And so if I have my hour and 41 minutes to tell my story and finally push back on that narrative, I'm going to cut right through that. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to be pragmatic and be realistic, because this is real life.
There's so much to chew on in it, and we're running towards the end of our time here, but I highly recommend the movie. I mean, again, it's because there's no like guilt message with it, and like, oh, you're responsible for these forest fires because you drive a Toyota Tacoma. It frees you up to enjoy it, and you give like the granular tactics of firefighting and talk about the political, you know, the pay stuff, and there's so much in it. I was like, I probably need to watch this a couple of times to really wrap my head around kind of, you know, all the material in here. There's so much to chew on. I mean, you could make a whole documentary on maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but you can make a whole documentary on like the different classes of firefighter, talking about their, you know, their facial hair and what they wear, and like the different cultures, and have them, you know, there's like a whole thing there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of material to chew on in this. So you did an excellent job, and yeah, it was a great watch. I mean, I can't recommend it more to anyone. So
thank you so much. Yeah, dude, when you just to unpack everything that's in the first 2 minutes, that opening scene, the movie doesn't start the way that people would expect a wildfire movie to start. And everyone else who's trying to make a wildfire documentary, they all start it the same way. It's just chaos, and they're trying to scare the heck out of you. Mine couldn't be the more opposite of that, because I spent way too much time ingesting this world and understanding it. I know better. And the first thing that you hear, the very first line, is wildfire is the greatest force of fairness in the universe. That kind of positive affirmation, it's not something that you expect out of a wildfire movie. But when you watch the full thing, you start to hopefully come on that journey of understanding what fire is. And when people watch this movie, they need to understand they're watching the Joker. They're not watching Batman. And so who you might be rooting for might not necessarily be the good guy. And it does take a few views to really understand it, because, brother, it took me 6 years to really understand wildfire and get to this point of being connected with my ancestors who took thousands of years to understand it. It is a very dynamic and interesting element in this world, and humans are connected to it. So even if you think, oh, I live in Middle Tennessee, I'm not connected to this, it's like, dude, give it a watch, and you will feel connected in a way that's going to surprise you. And regardless of where you live, just to behold the Herculean effort that these men and women go through, it's pretty incredible. They do great work, and so it's pretty awesome to see what they do.
It's occurring to me now too that, you know, previous maybe attempts to film this and stuff come from people who like don't like the people that they're documenting because they use, you know, they say gay or something. I don't know. Yeah, so they don't like them, so they don't want to, you know, humanize them, and that's why they start talking about the climate change and all this stuff, because they're too afraid to actually get to know their subject. And you clearly do not have that problem, and that's why it's so effective, because you want to know, you understand these people, you understand the culture, and you don't dislike it. You're fascinated by it. And I think too often when you see documentaries of this milieu, maybe blue collar people in general, it's from these kind of like sneering, you know, people in New York who like don't understand them. They're like, wait, he said a bad word. Doesn't he know that would offend this person? And, you know, like they're like, they think they're subhuman basically.
Dude, that is
ranting now, but
no, you have no idea how astute an observation this is. Because just like currently, I know of 2 film crews of 2 groups of women from Manhattan who are trying to film wildfire documentaries. Now, of course, 2023, this has been the slowest wildfire season of our lifetimes. Right. Now, of course, the media will never let you hear that, but that is true. So I sort of laugh that these bougie, you know, like urban city dwellers are trying to make their wildfire doc right now. It's the worst possible year to do it. But dude, you're so right.
Divine justice.
Dude, they are so triggered by these people. And as I touched on earlier, the people who tell the story of wildfire and the people who actually engage wildfires, they couldn't be more diametrically opposed. They don't represent the actual people doing this work. I was never a firefighter. I don't pretend to be one, but I understand them. And I'm agnostic about, you know, how they present to me publicly. I don't get triggered. I don't get offended by this stuff, dude. I grew up in sports. Like, these are filthy animals, and that's how I like it. But you are so right. These people get so triggered that they do resent them. But even beyond that, they sort of view them as circus animals. It's almost like they're going to the zoo, you know, and they've got their little thing of popcorn. They're like, oh, look at that dirty animal back there. Oh, isn't he interesting? And they can't wait to get back in their Tesla and go back home to their apartment. And you are so right, dude. That is a huge part of the reason everyone who's tried to make a movie about wildfire is a carpetbagger. Every single one. And that's why all the movies 100%. Suck. Dude, even Ron Howard made a documentary about wildfire. Did you know that? Of course not, because it sucked so badly. And it's like, here's this dude with tons of resources thinking, he's a great director. I'm sure it's probably a huge multi-million-dollar budget. But he just swoops in, tells his camera operators to go get stuff. They don't understand the community. They don't understand the culture. And then they swoop right on out when they're done. They don't actually absorb it. Dude, that's such an astute observation. And it's happening right now. You're going to see more documentaries come out, but dude, this is the
I've got a project I'm developing right now about drag racing, and it's like a similar thing. Like, I think there's like a Hollywood version of this where people are kind of afraid to engage with drag racing culture because it's the lower end of the racing sports. I mean, it engages a lot of hobbyists and it attracts a lot of uncouth characters to people who are pussies, basically. And so it's like a similar thing. Like you gotta, I have a friend who's a comedian, and the one thing he told me that I'll always remember is besides there's one joke, and then this was that you can't, as a comedian, you can't properly imitate someone or make fun of them unless you like actually love them, right? And that goes for any creative endeavor, whether it's writing about something or someone, or filming, or doing that kind of thing. Like people sense that. They can sense when you do not like your subject and you're afraid to engage with them or it. It comes across. And like yours, I mean, maybe that's why it just rang out so clearly. In addition to like the $100 million shots in there that were like, I mean, you couldn't stage those things, but like Hollywood, I mean, there were like expensive looking shots. Like the one with the mouse, like hopping along the ground. There's like so many little shots in there that I would go back that I could just like frame and put on my wall.
Thank you. And dude, you took the words out of my mouth, by the way. I was going to mention, I remember a Norm Macdonald quote where he was asked about Alec Baldwin's imitation of Donald Trump on SNL. And if he thought it was funny, he's like, no, it's not funny. He's like, because he's just mocking the guy. Yeah. You can't do a good imitation of somebody if you loathe them. You cannot resent somebody and then find their essence. You have to have compassion. You don't need to love them, but you have to have compassion and empathy for them so you can find their essence. And ultimately, it's not about if you sound like the person you're imitating. It's if you find their essence. And he was comparing them to Daryl Hammond, who would do Bill Clinton. He's like, his Clinton impression was so good because he didn't hate Bill Clinton. And so all these people who hate the people they're imitating, dude, you were so right. It's 100% true. I don't think you can do good art. And look, I'm not like a firefighter bootlicker here because I'm criticizing fire suppression. And these guys are guilty of doing some of that. And so, look, I'm just trying to be as fair and even-handed as possible. And part of that means not resenting people or looking down on them. I mean, look, man, I consider myself a salt of the earth dude anyway. I've got chickens. I can drive a stick shift. I'm not some bougie liberal like urban city dweller. So I'm not offended by these guys. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, people are just people. And we need to just accept them for who they are and not do this fake BS where it's like we have an equality bumper sticker. But if you disagree with me, you're a Nazi and I hate you. It's like, to me, that's disingenuous BS and I'm sick of it.
It's boring too. I mean, like, come on. Yeah. At least find a new insult. I've been, like someone called me like a blood and soil localist, trying to like, which is coded Nazi, because, because I like to make fun of the Yimbys. I think you liked one of my tweets that I did, but I like to make fun of the Yes in My Backyard people because they're like, my whole thing with them is that if you stripped their like, Yimbyism at its end is just the extermination of humans. Like, if you 100%. Take it to its logical conclusion, it's just, we need to remove the humans. They're in the way of us building more housing. Like, it's this weird thing that I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the Yimby, like, Yes in My Backyard is like, well, the problem here is that this person lives there and there should be 10 of them. So we just need to remove that person. It's exterminationist rhetoric. They just don't know it. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about now. Let's wrap this up. It was great chatting with you. We'll, this will be up on YouTube, etc. And I hope to, if you're ever in Nashville, please reach out. I'll message you my cell phone number. And it'd be great to, if you ever come into town, it'd be great to grab a beer, lunch or whatever. I'd love to.
Yeah, dude, you gotta come out to the studio. You gotta come out. And see the studio.
I would love to do that actually.
Yeah. Maybe
let's talk. I'm gonna wrap up the show and then stick around and we'll chat real fast.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. that is our show for the night. Thank you all for joining. Like we mentioned, you can go to hotshotthemovie.com to watch his doc. It's fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. And we'll see you next week.